Welcome live to Washington, and Jennifer Kavanagh, a senior fellow and director of military analysis at the foreign policy think tank Defence Priorities. Thank you for staying up late and being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so here's a little more from the US president on possible direct involvement in Israel's offensive on Iran's nuclear program. Here's Donald Trump.
We're the only ones that have the capability to do it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do it at all. I haven't made a decision.
So he's talking about US bunker buster bombs, which are capable of doing significant damage to the Fordo nuclear site in Iran. It's very deep inside a mountain. But just quickly, is it possible that the Israeli Prime Minister began this offensive without US agreement on the only way to achieve his military objectives?
Well, President Trump is correct that the United States is the only country that has the capabilities, the bomb and the aircraft, to take out the Fordo nuclear facility. And so I think it's probable that Netanyahu was hoping that if he started this war and was successful initially tactically against regime targets and other nuclear facilities, that the United States would see this as an opportunity to join in and to accomplish what has been a long time U.S. goal of ending the Iranian nuclear program. I think it's important to note, however, that there's no guarantee that even if the United States does use these bunker buster bombs, it would finally eliminate Iran's enrichment capabilities or forever end its pathway to a nuclear bomb. That can only be accomplished by political means, not military means.
It's interesting you say that because Joe Ciricione, who is an expert on nuclear non-proliferation and all things Iran and all things nuclear program in Iran, he explained how these bunker busters actually work in any kind of attack on the Fordo nuclear site there in Iran. Here he is. Listen to this.
The first aircraft, a B-2 rather, is the only aircraft that can carry this munition, has to drop one in a precise location, followed by another B-2 who would drop another in the crater. And that might not be enough, so you might have to do it a third or a fourth time.
So, in the words of, the US intelligence CIA boss from back in the Iraq days, it's not a slam dunk that US involvement here would actually destroy the Fordo nuclear site completely.
Certainly not with airstrikes. There would have to be a ground component, some kind of ground raid, to ensure that that facility was fully eliminated and that Iran's stockpiles of highly enriched uranium were either rendered unusable or inaccessible. And right now, no one is talking seriously about sending ground forces. So if we're relying only on air power, the chances are quite high that even with U.S. involvement, it would be impossible to achieve what Israel has set out as its strategic objective of eliminating, finally, this nuclear capability. And even if it was successful, if they were able to take out the facility and other facilities completely, there's still the matter of Iran's intellectual property. They figured this out once. They can figure it out again. The program might be delayed several years, even a decade. But it's only through political means and diplomacy that the challenge of Iran's nuclear weapons can be dealt with in a final and lasting way.
And returning to those nuclear negotiations at this point seems unlikely given what's happened, right?
Well, it certainly seems difficult. I mean, the challenge here is that Iran and the United States were talking. They were at the negotiating table when Israel began its attack. So now Iran has very little incentive to believe that if it returns to the negotiating table and makes additional concessions, it will actually be protected from future attacks. So it's not just a problem of the threat of additional military attacks from Israel or the United States, but also a problem of assurances. The United States has limited means here to provide Iran credible assurances that if it makes concessions, the attacks will stop and won't start again. And for the regime, obviously, there's the domestic audience, too, that's watching this and could see a return to the negotiating table as a sign of weakness.
And President Trump now appears to be in open disagreement with his own US intelligence, as you mentioned. He's moved a lot closer to the Israeli position on how soon Iran could build a nuclear weapon. So here's the assessment from the IAEA.
We did not have any proof of a systematic effort to move into a nuclear weapon. The material is there. There have been in the past some activities related to the development of nuclear weapons, but we did not have at this point this element.
At this point, does the question of how close Iran was to developing a nuclear weapon with the capability of delivering that nuclear weapon simply a matter of legality for Israel's justification for a preemptive strike? Does it really matter at the end of the day beyond that?
I mean, I think it does matter for U.S. decision makers here, because how close Iran is should be the guiding factor in U.S. decision making. And if it is true that Iran is actually several years away from having the capability to weaponize the highly enriched uranium that it has, then getting involved and dragging the United States into what will be a long and costly military campaign again in the Middle East is a big risk. If it's true that this weapon isn't even a real threat right now. I mean, this is a real replay for the American public of what we saw in the Iraq War. This threat of nuclear weapons that needs to be taken out immediately, that turn out to not actually be a threat.
Yeah, because it does seem to be this overwhelming opinion, certainly, within U.S. politics, and especially on the right, that no matter what Iran says, they're lying through their teeth. They can never convince anybody that they have no interest in a nuclear weapons program, and that ultimately they have this desire to build a nuclear bomb regardless of the timing here. So now is as good a time as any.
Well, I guess I disagree with that assessment. I mean, I think the risks here to the United States of getting involved are extremely high. There's this idea that just a few strikes at the Fordo plant will wrap it up. We can declare victory and come home, but that's not how it will play out. It's unimaginative to think that Iran will not retaliate against U.S. bases in the Middle East if the United States gets involved. We have 40,000 U.S. forces, many of which are stationed at vulnerable, non-hardened bases. And so then you start to see U.S. casualties, and the United States would have to respond to that. And you're now into a protracted war. Iran also has other ways that it can impose pain on the United States, whether it's cyber attacks or other types of irregular warfare activities. So the risks of another long-term military campaign for the United States are quite high. I don't see that risk as being worth the threat based on what we know from U.S. intelligence and U.S. interests in the region and globally.
Jennifer Kavanagh, some very good salient points there to end our interview on. Thank you so much for being with us. And it is a good point to remember, the law of unintended consequences. There is no such thing as a simple engagement in the Middle East. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to go now live.